saying, any questions? It's really hard to break. I said that for 20 years, and so I will still say that every once in a while. I want to grab it and bring it back in my mouth after I say it, because 99 times out of 100, there's not any of you sitting there that are going to ask me a question. So if I say, okay, any questions, it's almost like just a waste of time. That's not checking for understanding. Yeah, good.
Is it better to take up the whole class and do the need as time or ask a question and then let them raise their hand and call on different people, not only one person all the time? Or is it better to call on someone first and then ask the question?
First of all, you never call on someone first and ask the question. Let's talk about that. I'm very glad you asked that.
Because that's
what happens if I said, Laura, what happens to the rest of you? Thank God you didn't call me and you are gone.
But you did.
And you're thinking about how much time is left in the class and how much longer we have to show. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but when you went around, that's why you did that and we discussed about that.
I'm glad you brought it up because it is really important when you're working with the class not to call the name first. And thank you for pointing it out because that's an excellent observation. To ask the question, wait time is very important. And I'll tell you why it's important. The auditory learner processes the question immediately and has their hands up. That doesn't mean they're the smartest people in the class. They process it in their brain faster and their hands are up before you ever finish asking questions. The visual learner is taking that question, processing it into a vision of some kind in their mind and formulating the answer, and so pretty soon they have their hands up. The kinesthetic person is slowest because they have to listen, either do something with it, write it down, do something that they've learned how to do in their body and their mind with, I'm not good with kinesthetics, we use many examples, and then they have the answer. So what happens in the classroom is the auditory people always appear the smartest because they just process it faster. So you want to ask the question, wait. And it's amazing, the research shows that if you wait up to 8 seconds, it makes a tremendous difference in your classroom. It is based by all students. And then, call it someone.
Well, then what do you do when you have a lead child or whatever in your class and they never raise their hand?
Okay.
So you never know what to do.
Then you need, and that's a good, fair question to ask, you need to have, I would not even include them in this process. I would have other ways that I would do that. And the other ways, let me just say, for example, if I'm lecturing and I have an LD person, and you'll see this, I think somebody already wrote this up in an observation where the teacher, without saying anything to anybody or whatever, handed them, the LD person's student in their class, copies of the visuals where everyone else was expected to take notes. But just at the beginning of the class, when the student walked in, handed them a copy of the visuals because that was too much to ask for them to do. And then you might have prepared ahead of time 2 or 3 level questions that would be appropriate, have it written down on paper, and then just add, when you're through with your lecture, you might go back and ask the student to write down the answer to that, or something appropriate, or sit down one-on-one with them. But don't ever embarrass them in class. And you'll learn what they can handle and what they can't. Okay? Checking for understanding. Okay. Lots of ways you can do that. If you can, the more students you can involve, the better. Asking a question, sampling one student is the poorest probably, because it's one teacher, one student all the time. So anything you can think to do that involves everybody in the classroom is more effective. I did one example of thumbs up, thumbs down, and teachers will say to me, well, I want to do that because they have to just look and see what the other person's doing. Well, of course. I know what I know then. If I see everybody's head looking to see what somebody did, I have the information I need. They didn't know. So use it. Try it. Because, I've seen teachers do all kinds of things like they'll use thumbs up and they put it right in front of your chest so nobody else can see it. Well, it doesn't matter. If I tell you to put thumbs up and I see heads looking around, if I see everybody immediately put their thumb up, I know you've got it. If I see half of you put your thumb up and the other half kind of looking around, I know I have some work to do. So it gives you the information. It's for you, the teacher, not for them. It is for them in a way, but if it's something really, really important, you might have everybody write it down. Everybody write down the answer and look around in class, okay? And see, then you can look at what they've written. Lots of different things you can do.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
As far as being visual or kinesthetic, or does that change, or you always that throughout your life, or you always that the same
You
kind
have
of
a
learner?
preferred mode, and you don't have any control over that. That's your brain. It doesn't mean that you can't do the others. You make adjustments and you compensate to be able to do other ways, but ultimately you still have to use that preferred mode.
Now, I have a child that when I touch him, he can hear me off, but otherwise, he has to do it.
He has to have some touch or feeling.
But he can listen to me as long as I'm touching him hard. I got his hand.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Is that you can't, I mean, I know I'm auditory, but I've had to learn things visually. And when I would be told that I had to act out something, which is kinesthetic activity, well, that's not my preferred way, but I could learn to do it. So we learn, you have to learn, because most schools are catered to the auditory.
Well, I was thinking, because I'm very visual, I'm thinking I can do the kinesthetic okay, but the auditory, I think I have a problem thinking of how to present that, because I'm on the other end of it. Not
You just talk. If you have your model that you're using, you're demonstrating, just tell what you're doing while you're doing it. And that works. That takes care of the problem. In other words, let's just say as an art example, if you were doing something with clay or paint or whatever medium you were going to use, if you just said, watch me, and you just did it, then yes, your visuals would pick up right away. But I wouldn't have clue what you were doing. So
So
you
you
would
almost
have
have
to
to explain
say,
every step as you're doing it.
yeah. Okay, first I'm going to do this, and watch how I do this. Okay, and then I'll take this instrument and do da-da-da-da-da. You get the idea? Just speak about what you're doing. That takes care of everything. I'm very auditory. I love novels on tapes. I mean, if you listen to novels on tapes, anybody part of your time now in your life, if you're a student, but that's the best way in the world if I'm going to drive to Kansas City. Or I can do a novel on the way to Kansas City and it's wonderful. Other people that would drive absolutely nuts if you're not auditory. I always said if anyone put a tape recorder in my car, I'd be arrested because I talk to myself all the time. Can't you see drivers talk to themselves? That's auditory people. We're talking about how it is. We're solving the day's problems. We just talk out loud about it and go on, and we have a little voice in our head that talks to us all the time. We're not crazy. That's just auditory. We have to do that. Okay. The next part of lesson design is guided practice. On guided practice, you're still involved. Let me try to give you some good examples. If, let's say we've just taught an English lesson, just to make it easy, a grammar lesson, we could all relate to that. Well, on guided practice, I might say, okay, here's a worksheet that has 25 sentences that I want you to correct, all right? Let's do the first 3 together. Let's everybody work on this together. Okay, then have someone read the first sentence and we decide as a class what to do with it. That's guided practice. In other words, the teacher's still involved. If you have trouble doing it, the teacher's still there to prompt, give suggestions, give you clues, okay? Then if I see after question 3 that it seems like everybody's going ahead and working on the worksheet, then I pretty well know they've got it, and I'll stop. If I see that there's still a lot of confusion, I might say, well, let's do 4 and 5 together. Until I see what I'm doing here, get a comfort level. Now do the other 20 for homework and grade. Does that make sense? So guided practice, the teacher is still there, involved. But it's beyond just checking for understanding. Now we're really having the students do it. So it really is for the students. And it's a decision time. Do I start all over? They can't do it. I do sentences 1 through 3, they can't do it. I do sentences 4 and 5, they can't do it. I do sentences 6, 7, and 8, and we're still in trouble. I probably would forget that as a homework assignment and come back and review the lesson the next day and then give them that last test. Does that make sense? You can't ignore what you find out. You may not like what you find out. You may have thought you did a wonderful job, and you don't understand why in the world you can't do it, but you haven't done a wonderful job because you have not thought the most learned. Well, if they can't do it, no matter how great you thought you were, you didn't do a good job. Do you need to extend the learning? Sometimes you just need to abandon the lesson. It'll happen to you sooner or later. It happened to all of us, where we really thought we did a good job, and we find out we didn't do a very good job at all, and we got to start all over. And the best thing is to admit it, put it away for the day, let's start a new day tomorrow. Finally, you have, well not finally, but the next to last thing is independent practice, and that means now I taught you well enough that I think you can do homework or a painting or a project or something all on your own. Does that make sense? That's grade time. This is where I'm going to grade. When I have you do independent practice, I feel like you're ready now for me to assess how well you know this information. It doesn't have to be a test. It could be a performance, an activity, it could be many things. Now, this may not always happen when you're doing in class, because you may teach something for 3 or 4 or 5 days before you do this. Does that make sense? And in some cases, like an art project, they may then work the rest of the week on this. It depends on your subject matter, okay? But as far as your class for today, you need to summarize at the end what we do today. Answer the question that's asked at the dinner table. When mom and dad say, what did you do in class today? You have an answer because the teachers provided it. They enclosure at the end. They went back and said, this is what we've accomplished today. This is where we're headed tomorrow. We've done a good job with this. We've got to spend a little more time with this. Does that make sense? So that the student who saw in the anticipatory set, the objectives and all that, what was going to happen, has some kind of feeling at the end, well, okay, where are we with all that? What happened? Where are we? Did we accomplish that objective or not? Make sense? For the people who need to see the whole picture, that closure is really, really important. Now then, we'll finish off with a check for understanding. A little guided practice. I think we're probably to the point where it's fair assessment to say it's guided practice. And what I'd like for you to do with this, since I'm going to get to the tutors out on time, is, about 3 or 4 of you, kind of what's a natural grouping where you're sitting. Would you work on this together for, we'll work for about 3 minutes. To answer as many as you can. If you don't get them all answered, it's okay. So let's work with it. On the board, you're walking in, it says, be ready to tell the 3 ways we learned yesterday to determine whether or not a word is a noun. What do you think it is?
Checking understanding.
No. Anticipatory set. Okay. Yes. That would be a check for understanding, but if it's written on the board when they enter the room, which of course, as I said, when you look at the sheet, you're not, you may come at it from a different way. That's what it was intended to be. If that was on the board when they walked in, the idea would be that as they sat down and they saw that, they would start to try to come up with the answer, which would be the anticipatory set. Okay, teacher says, today we're going to learn 2 ways to disagree agreeably. Object. And if you want more on these, raise your hand if you want more explanation. Teacher writes on the board, have you ever been really afraid to do something, but you forced yourself to do it? Be ready to share.
Anticipatory.
Okay, that's good. Now that's a little clearer than the first one, wasn't it? Okay. Teacher says, everyone get a sentence ready that will explain the difference between fact and opinion.
Independent practice.
Okay, that could be. What else? Does anyone have something else? It could be, and there again, we don't know when this happened in the class, so you could justify that answer either way. Teacher says blood pressure is a measurement of the. What is that? Input. Good. There's no doubt about that one. Teacher says, as I list the things I observed in actual interviews on the job, show thumbs up if you consider this to be good practice, thumbs up if you consider it harmful, thumbs to decide if you're not sure.
Checking understanding.
Teacher writes on board, on scratch paper, write a basic program to add 5 numbers and get an average.
Independent practice.
Okay, what else might it be?
Independent practice.
Or it could be check for understanding, because it said scratch paper. You know, we don't know. If that was on the board when I walked in, that's an anticipatory set. If I said it right before I did anything else in class, it's still an anticipatory set. If I had just taught how to write a basic program and I said get a piece of scratch paper, it could be check for understanding. Make sense? Depends on when it happened. Teacher said today we're going to talk about why some people are proponents of living wills.
Objective.
No. It's a good one to talk about. Why is that not an objective? It could be anticipatory set. It's not an objective because it doesn't say what the student will be able to do at the end of the lesson. And that's a good one to put on there. Could be anticipatory set. I don't think it's a very good objective. And the reason I don't is the objective should be stating what behavior change we're going to see in the student as a result of the lesson. What will the student be able to do that they were not able to do?
This like sets up what they can anticipate to do, right? Today we're going to talk about. Okay, I just want to understand.
So you think it's,
So I think it's an anticipatory set. These are not worth debating. I mean, we could read if, and make them something else, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
If you just get the general idea. Teacher says, let's say if we have debits and credits straight in mind. I'll read some transactions that affect the cash account, hold up your paper to see. Debit, hold up to see. What is that?
Check if I understand.
And that's a good way to do things where I've used colored papers before, or papers with responses yes or no, and they hold up the paper instead of thumbs up or thumbs down. Everybody's involved. Everybody has to do something. The teacher has students read page 37 to determine the answer to a question.
Independent practice.
Or input.
input.
Just a little idea to see if some of this is starting to come into your mind.